and legal representation. In NACC's 48-year history, this award has only been given 4 times previously. This year, NACC gives the Distinguished Achievement Award to Howard Talenfeld. For 3 decades, Howard Talenfeld has led efforts to seek justice and improve the child welfare system alongside young people in Florida. As an attorney, he works tirelessly on behalf of young people, particularly those harmed while in foster care, group homes, and institutions. Howard brings energy and care to his legal work, and he was a champion for elevating youth voice long before it was recognized as best practice. Howard has founded and co-founded multiple organizations advocating for children and their rights. He is the co-founder and lead partner at his law firm's Justice for Kids division. Howard is the founding board president of Florida's Children First, which advances the rights of young people and advocates for children's right to counsel in Florida. Through his work at Florida's Children's First, he helped create Florida Youth Shine, an organization of lived experience experts working to change the culture of Florida's child welfare system. As a policy advocate, Howard has improved Florida's system in countless ways. He drafted the legislation to create Florida's first children's law office pilot project, secured funding to help Legal Aid Service of Broward County create children's law offices, and wrote Florida's Foster Children's Bill of Rights. Howard led legislative advocacy to help young people with lived experience in the system get stable housing in college and in life. He also led the legislative fight that created mandatory appointments of attorneys for kids with disabilities, children who are medically fragile, and victims of human trafficking. Howard continues to be a champion for high-quality legal representation in the right to counsel in one of the largest states that still does not guarantee it to all children. As one of his nominators wrote, Howard Talenfeld has not only shaped the child welfare landscape in Florida, he has inspired a generation of advocates nationwide to never stop fighting for justice on behalf of our most vulnerable children. Another nominator wrote, thousands of young people like myself who could have become another statistic instead gained the confidence, leadership skills, and opportunities to pursue their dreams because of Howard's vision and volunteer efforts, which has produced real results year after year. Please read the packet online, the full packet, and join me in congratulating Howard Talenfeld, NACC's 2025 Distinguished Achievement Award.
Thank you, Kim and Don. Wow. And thank NACC for presenting the most meaningful recognition in my life. And most importantly, putting on this conference with a theme of Catalysts for Change. I want to thank persons that nominated me, Jim and John Walsh from Palm Beach Legal Aid, and Jerry Glynn, who really believed in the work that I've been doing over the last 4 decades. And congratulations to some of the most amazing co-honorees today. Jenna, Melissa, Samantha, and Mimi. You're a tough act to follow. Wow, truthfully. And I want to share this award with my Justice for Kids team that are sitting here today, that is always fighting for children in our nation's foster care system. And particularly, my partner, Stacy Schmerling. Stacy, you've tolerated me for 17 years, and everybody knows what that means. And Justin, you're an amazing partner. You put on and produced the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame party last night. And to my loyal assistant, Sharon Herman, who is back at home and couldn't be here today, thank you for being our firm mother. You're amazing. And what a team we have created together. I also truly share this award with my wife, Julie Talenfeld, who, with her public relations firm, Boardroom Communications, and that's Michelle, Donnie, Todd, Mara, Jessica. You've amplified my voice, and more importantly, the voices of tens of thousands of foster children in Florida and those throughout the country. Wow. And thank you to almost everyone in this room, because you know that foster care is a failing and imperfect system that re-traumatizes so many foster children across America. It still is an experiment that hasn't proven that it works yet. You know, I spent almost 4 decades in courtrooms watching an American tragedy continue to unfold children, some barely old enough to speak, facing multiple traumas of physical and sexual and emotional abuse as a result of the system that's supposed to protect them. They were taken from their natural parents because of neglect and abuse. And I can't tell you how many parents have told me, I didn't do this to my children. I didn't sexually abuse them. I didn't physically abuse them. I didn't do it. The foster care system did. But here's what really guts me. When I started in this business almost 40 years ago, I was representing the state of Florida, governors, secretaries who ran the largest child welfare system in the country, but for the HCFA, the Federal Centers for Medicaid now. And I was chairing the National Association of State Mental Health Lawyers Class Action Committee. And we had to figure out what was happening across the nation. There were more than 20 states facing class action lawsuits, which meant there were classes of children that advocates argued were facing substantive due process violations, and that is that they were deteriorating in care because the states couldn't keep them safe and because they weren't receiving services based upon professional judgment. The Youngberg versus Romeo case that you all have been reading about as part of this conference. And you know what? Today, Casey Families, one of our co-sponsors of this conference, is reporting there are 29 of these class actions across America. And I'm sure the other 21 states aren't doing so well with consent decrees. Some of them, like Illinois, have lasted 40 years almost. You know, they're across the country, New York, you name the states, Oregon. They've been all facing class actions, and many of you live in those states where advocates have been fighting very hard to, file these cases for prospective injunctive relief to help the children of their states and nation. And yet, when you ask anybody, I want to ask you, is there a child welfare state in this country that is the model system, that is working, that is doing something that is, really helping these children, really making a difference in their lives? And I haven't heard the answer yet in my career. What's that model state? Well, I'll tell you, Casey, that's in 50 states, what they say is that there are some communities of hope, there's some programs of hope, but they're evanescent they disappear. Remember Alabama, that was the example that we used to give years ago? When the class action left, so did the practice. And this is what I've learned in my career. Now, we're facing even greater tragedy right now and an even greater threat for the clients that we all represent. And those are the new threats of Congress cutting Medicaid, educational vouchers, and chafy foster care vouchers for housing. And what could impact everybody in this room is if there are cuts to Title 4E that provides for the funding for lawyers and all of the progress that NACC has made to date. And very few children, and this I can tell you for sure, you come through the systems, you fight to protect their permanency, you fight to protect their safety as individual advocates and champions. And yet, how many of these children have been emotionally abused, physically abused, sexually abused, and actually have any kind of help after the age of 18? Because they don't have lawyers that are protecting them and filing personal injury claims on their behalf when they've been seriously and permanently scarred for life and they need life care plans. So many of these cases have haunted me because I've had a unique vantage point in my career from having seen the inside of these statewide systems and seeing the tragedies that unfold. And then when I was smart enough to become an advocate from the outside and I joined the board of the Youth Law Center in the 1990s, and the solution was filing class actions, I realized, yes, that's an important element. It's an important solution. Let's get prospective injunctive relief to try to fix these systems. But you know what? As soon as the class action goes away, what happens? The systems return to the state of confidentiality. Nobody cares. And it's because nobody sees. You see, the advocates can see, but the public does not see. And there's no public relations firm that are resounding these cries for help. The individual youth you've seen today, you've seen through this conference, the youth experts in foster care. They don't have public relations firms. They don't have lobbyists. They can't control budgeting and fixing these systems. And what is so tragic, these are confidential systems. And that's why the public just doesn't know. And what's really happened? The United States has created these child protection systems that are so broken that they've normalized physical, sexual, and emotional abuse throughout the country. Well, what are the adult consequences after the age of 18? What does Casey tell us? What do the statistics tell us? What's happening to foster youth? 20% of foster youth are homeless after 4 years. 25% develop PTSD. I guarantee there's so many more. Half never finish high school. How many get jobs? Look at the pipelines into the delinquency and then to the prison systems and ultimately to death row in this country. That's what the United States has created at this point. But there's still hope. We're in the hope ballroom, aren't we? And appropriately funding child welfare systems is absolutely needed. But more important, the one thing that I learned early on in my career with the Youth Law Center is that having real legal representation, like the traditional program, the New York Legal Aid Society, that is a solution. Every child needs a champion. You've heard that so many times. And you are the champions that can make a difference to get these children safety, appropriate therapeutic services, and permanency. I founded Florida Children's First almost 25 years ago because I had seen enough and I realized that the class actions from child welfare advocacy groups like Youth Law Center, National Center for Youth Law, Children's Rights, Better Place, they weren't doing enough. And there's a reason, no matter how wonderful in many senses, the Lost Children of Wilder, they called attention, they got to the press, they made a difference. But what these law firms and advocacy organizations did not have was a constituency. They did not have youth experts. They did not have the youth voice. They did not have attorneys and champions. There were not an on-the-ground constituency who could vote, who could fight. And you have that opportunity, each and every one of you. Each and every one of you is doing that. You're doing it. And those of you that you've left behind at home are doing the same thing. You're training, you're getting better. And some amazing things are happening at this conference. But you know what? What we learned with Florida Children's First is that we could, as advocates on the ground, do things like hire lobbyists, pass laws. We've passed so many laws in Florida. But that's not enough. That's not enough all by itself. We've passed laws dealing with right to records, foster care bill of rights, right to educational stability and staying in the same school district. Just this last session, getting a centralized housing authority and vouchers for housing for independent living, disability services and the rights to, for these children to have their education and go to school free of charge. We've passed those laws. But you know what? That's just in Florida, and it still hasn't worked. And you folks know that as hard as we fought in Florida, so much more has to be done to get a lawyer for every child, a champion for every child. But NACC, as an organization, has the potential to do so much more on a national basis. As I look around this room, I see hope. I see all of you listening. I see all of you learning. I see the enthusiasm. And I see that there's a champion in every single one of you who can stand up, who can fight for children. And you can also fight not only individually, you can fight systemically. And that's the point of an organization like this. You can make a difference. We're hopeful, that we can improve the system. We're hoping we can protect against the federal cuts in funding. We need to protect against the federal cuts in funding. And these children cannot wait for the right budget cycle. They cannot wait for the right time. They need an army of child welfare advocates like you fighting together individually and systemically, before they age out of the system and end up on the streets and in psychiatric wards and, homeless and in prisons. That's what they need. And so the right theme for this conference was Catalysts for Change. And I urge you not only to take what you learn, take what you feel, to be energized, and take that back home to understand, and I see this right now, the 5-year plan, NACC's real plan is amazing, okay? They've established the framework and the structure to be able to go fight the wars in Washington too, and they have the structure to fight the wars in every single state in this country, okay? With you, the Army. If you have that enthusiasm to make that kind of difference and be those champions individually and systemic. And I saw this just recently in email that they now have They have a fund, the Children's Justice Fund. That is something that really needs to be supported. And I know all of you don't have, because you fight and you do your jobs for legal aids and other organizations like that. You don't have that money, but you know people who do. You have the ability to advocate to support NACC. And so, I say to all of you, you are the Army. Let's make a difference together. And I also want to thank you for this amazing, incredible award that really is something that has touched me more than any other award or status or anything else I've ever had the opportunity to do. Thank you so much.